Hello, everyone. We had a cracking of a session, I think, the previous session with Ravi and Anand. Really interesting questions, and I love the audience participation. Um, Again, hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining the Hash Growth Product Summit. My name is Ashwin. I oversee marketing at MoEngage. And then building on the exciting panel session that we had last, we have another exciting panel session. We're going to sort of continue the conversation that Ravi and Anand were having in the previous panel and sort of take that a little bit forward, hopefully in this current panel. So we will be talking about product-led growth. And product-led growth has been a bit of a hot topic in the recent past. And honestly, there are a ton of information available out there about this topic. But in this panel, we will try and get a chance to talk to product managers and product owners who have actually delivered significant growth, right? So the idea is to cut through all the noise and sort of theoretical knowledge that's available and hopefully get some first-hand insights from people who have actually built and managed products which have delivered rapid growth for their brands, right? So we have a very interesting panel that's coming up. It's got panelists from across very diverse category of business, from content to groceries to a marketplace. And with that, I would love to welcome our panelists for this session, Vakul, Jasjeet, and Shelly. Welcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you.
Session.
Awesome. We'll start, with a bit of introductions. But before we get on with the introductions, just a quick reminder to the audience. Please do feel free to type in your questions. We are going to be picking up interesting questions as and when they come along. So we're not going to wait till the end of the conversation. So we'll try to keep it as conversational, and we'll try to get as many questions as possible. Awesome. Let's get started. So Shelly, Jasjeet, Vakul, do you guys want to sort of give a quick introduction about yourselves and then we can get started? Shelly, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Shaili. I head product at Pratilipi, and I'm also one of the founders of Pratilipi. Uh, in nutshell, what Pratilipi does is it's a storytelling platform. It's a UGC storytelling platform and one of India's largest UGC storytelling platform. So we have three products. We have literature product, we have comics, and we have audio. So we are platform. So we have readers coming to the platform and consuming content in different formats like comics, audio, and text. And then we have creators who would come to the platform and they would create the content in forms of comics, audio, and text. So that's what the Pratilipi does.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelly. Welcome. Jasjeet?
Yeah. So hey, I'm Jasjeet, and I have about 15 years of work in technology and product. And I think I've been very fortunate to have worked across geographies to solve user problems, and I have diverse background in terms of working with BlackBerry, then coming over to messaging. I worked with Anand when he was there in Bharti Airtel, and I was the director of product for Wink. So
Oh,
I
wow.
could very well
Small world.
very well relate to the stories, and then into MobiQuick, where I was the director of product again. And over here, at OLX, I am leading the dealer experience for the group for the emerging markets.
Awesome. Thanks, Jasjeet. Vakul?
Hi everyone, my name is Vakul. I lead retention, product, and consumer lifecycle marketing at Grofers. I've been with Grofers for almost over 5.5 years now, from the very start. We've seen some crazy cycles, some down cycles, and some up cycles. And thankfully, we are doing really well at this point in time. So yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much again. So let's start with a bit of, Anand sort of talked about what product-led growth really means, but from your perspective, why don't we start with a definition? What does product-led growth really mean for you, and how do you guys do it in your organizations currently? Anyone? Vakul, would you want to go first?
Yeah. So first is growth, right? And there are different variations out there, right? What is growth? Does marketing own growth? Does product own growth, etc., right? And within Grofers, we have faced these problems. Right? When we talk about product-led growth, it is leveraging your existing users that you have to, one, drive more new users using them. That is one. The second is, how do you then use your platform to engage users better, give them an experience which they they feel is good enough for them. And there is one vector that we measure at Grofers, which is the shopping on the app enjoyable or not? Right? And we track it. So there is a consumer track. We track it every quarter, and we see if that movement is going up or down. Right. So these are two ways wherein we define product-led growth. One is towards acquisition. The second is purely towards engagement and better retention, using the platform, not the product, the platform that we use, right, which is the app or the website.
Got it. And that's an interesting, point that you mentioned. And, I wanted to sort of come back to that question a bit later, which is you have growth, you have marketing, you have product, and then sometimes when everyone's responsible for growth, no one's responsible for growth, right? So, we'll come back to that question a little bit later. But Shelly and Jasjeet, how do you sort of look at the whole product-led growth and the growth, and sort of how do you sort of define it?
So in my mind, I think it comes back to the fundamental question that why now everyone is so interested about product-led growth, right? I think we have gone through the cycles of marketing and sales leading the growth, and now it is more about product. I think it is more about sustainability. Can you sustain the growth? Can you enhance the growth? And how do you do that? The core comes to what is the user problem that your product is solving, and how well you're solving. So Vakul rightly pointed about delightability in your experience, right? So whenever you have that problem, can you look and can you have a recall that this is the right product for me to fix that problem, right? So at any point of time, if I want to discard old item, the first thing that should come to your mind is OLX, because it solves your problem in that way, right? So again, what is that user problem that you want to solve? And is that user problem, can your product come into your recall, in the user's recall when he has the need? Can he can you do enough so that there is enough awareness and leads to enough acquisition and goes into down the funnel? And of course, in order to do this, in my definition of product-led growth, it is also about team, right? It is also not just about product team, it is about the whole organization coming together to solve a user problem. So I think these are the different facets that define a product-led growth in my mind.
Got it. And Shelly, what about you? I mean, how do you sort of look at this?
Yeah, Shin. So Pratilipi being in the UGC space, we are slightly different, as in we do not have a growth function who works separately. So we have product growth. So part of the growth experiments are done by the product team only. And then we have the marketing team. Now, as Vakul pointed out, that there is a clear responsibility overlap here. And so, as Vakul mentioned, that there are growth has two facets primarily, that there is the equation and then the existing user base, how much additional value they are bringing to the system, and how they are bringing the organic users in terms of network effect on your product. So that's where we boils down to the KPIs, that what KPIs different teams are having, right? So in our case, basically product plus growth and marketing, if you talk, we have our North Star, which is very common, and that's a primary responsibility area for everyone. But which is basically in our case, for reader side, we have stories finished, and on the creator side, we have stories published a day. So, but in nutshell, for product team, along with the KPIs, what we just talked about, we also have customer satisfaction and the NPS in place. So, having both of these things in place, this is how we address the growth at different functions at Pratilipi.
Got it. And how do you sort of, can you walk me through how do you sort of set this whole structure up, right? Whether it's in terms of getting the right people in, or structuring the team members, or structuring it, right? I mean, so I'm curious a little bit, because does it sort of depend on the maturity of the organization as the organization scales, or when it's starting up, what should be the structure, who should own it, and how it sort of evolves as you guys have grown, as the organizations have grown, right? And all of your organizations have had a fairly steep growth curve.
Correct. So Ashwin, we are even so we keep iterating over this. I do not have a solid answer for this. It's basically we are learning with as and when the company matures, as and when the team matures. But to start off with, if I just talk about the product team, so if you just look at the product roadmap at Pratilipi, so apart from the strategic level clarity which we have and that you would be seeing in the roadmap, 80% of the roadmap for weekly basis, you will see that a lot of things we would be trying out and which is very experiment first. So which is very, preliminary hypothesis driven. So, we had a growth team, then we diluted the growth team, then product was the function which was leading the growth, and then we have the marketing team at this point. So the org structure and the team structure uh, keeps changing with time, but then mostly it is about the individual trade-offs every single team is taking, either it's marketing or it is product or it is growth, how much data driven and how much hypothesis first you are in taking those bets. So that's what I would say, that the different function and the team would evolve. Yeah.
Got it. Vakul, I think, I saw you sort of nodding your head when I was asking that question.
Because see, I've been in the system, at least at Growthers, from the very start, and we have seen many changes in the overall structure. Right? In 2015, there was very less concept about product growth. Right? It never existed in 2015 per se. And then there was hardly one or two product managers. They were essentially taking care of getting the website or the app right, because every now and then there were few bugs out there. Right. In 2016 and 17 is when there were few initiatives, at least at Growthers, which were taken to drive retention from the product side, the likes of loyalty program coming up, etc., etc. Now, there are two things which at least we fundamentally believe at Growthers. Product management has recently come up. The brand management in the technical FMCG space has been there for almost quite a few decades, right? And the process remains more or less same, wherein you try to create concepts, right? You test concepts among your TGs. Then you say, okay, this concept works in qual, then you follow it with a quant, and then decide this goes and this is what you will build, right? This entire process was missing when we started product-led growth in 2016 or 17. It was majorly based on hypothesis. 3 of us or 7 of us sitting in a room saying, we think that this might work. This is a hypothesis. Let's build this, test it out. If it works, then fine. If it doesn't, then we'll revise it. Now, there are multiple things wrong in this entire process, right? Because firstly, the thing that we discuss majorly in a room is very off than what the consumer thinks at his or her home. There's a complete mismatch, right? Even now, I would say, at least for me, I'm 90% wrong in my hypothesis that, okay, this is what my TG would think like, right? And they surprise you at many levels, right? So then, because we had a very experienced leader within marketing who joined us in 2016 as well. See, we borrowed those learnings from the FMCG space, right? And then developed it into our product growth strategy as well. The central part or the main part of the team is consumer insights team, wherein we have hired from the likes of IMRB or Kantar or Nielsen. And then this team, along with the product managers and the UX designers, help in creating concepts, right? Not one, but at least 3 or 4 concepts that we would want to test for a qual or a quant before deciding what goes and what we would build. And then obviously on top of it, there are advancements. The other thing that happened was the budgets are owned by the marketing team, right? The product team does not own budgets. So we made a separate function called product growth, which now sits in marketing, right? And closely work with so there's a mini pod, right? So they work with the marketing team, they're part of the marketing team, and hence they're able to contribute much more in a very seamless way, right? There is no tussle that, okay, I want XYZ budget, okay, and this is how I'll show ROI, etc. So that has worked really well for us.
Got it. And that's an interesting one. And I'll come back to. I think there's a couple of questions that's specific for you, Vakul. I think one of them is around the competition. I mean, it is a fairly competitive market.
Now it is.
It is.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that. But I want to go to Jasjit now. Jasjit, I think in your case it's slightly different, right? I mean, you majoritarily deal or you predominantly deal with the dealer experience as part of your business, right? So how would you sort of define growth for that?
Yeah, no, so I think that is a very interesting question because what happens is we are majorly dealing with cars, right? And in cars, in emerging markets, about 70% of the inventory of cars touch a dealer at some point in time. So there is a huge marketplace or participation from an unorganized sector. And the main optimization that we are trying to do is how do you optimize on the consumer buyer experience. So again, it flows like how do you provide that seamless experience to the consumer buyer, and in the process what are the tools or the regulations or things that you need to provide to a dealer so that is there. So in the markets that we operate in, we are operating in supply starved, demand heavy markets. So there is demand, but in order to sustain demand you have to make sure that the experience is smoothness. So that is our core metric over there, that is defining that how do I make my dealer more successful. I have to, in order to do that, I have to make sure that there is trust on the dealer for the consumer, because that is one of the biggest problems that we hear from a consumer buyer, that I don't trust a dealer. So how do you enforce that through inspections and things like that, and how do you make sure that that experience translates into a transaction so that there is more likelihood of more of these dealers coming into our ecosystem, sustaining, and we helping them grow and simplify their business. So again, our growth is in dealers growth, which is in the transaction or the peace of mind with which the consumer buyer buys the car. So that's how the equation is currently set up.
That's interesting. So is that sort of like your main North Star metric or your main goal, which you look at, which is basically the transactions?
Yes.
Got it. Got it. And there is an interesting question here, and I think all three of you sort of referenced setting KPIs, right? I think you spoke about a bunch of different things that you can measure, but curious to understand, like, how do you go about setting these KPIs, right? So first of all, how do you know it's working? How do you know that that you have a fairly smooth product growth engine? How do you know it's working, and how do you sort of set those KPIs? How do you, arrive at that conclusion that it's working?
Yeah, so maybe I can start.
Sure.
When I was thinking about this, right, I think the first thing that comes is that what are the elements of user problem that we are trying to solve. The first is awareness or recall. The second is your acquisition, or how do you acquire your customers. Third is engagement, right? And with different industries, I have seen like there are similar or different matrices that you use to track them, but essentially it boils down to three different these set of buckets of matrices that are relevant for you. So yeah.
Got it. Got it. Shelly, how about you? How do you how do you know that it's working, and what sort of metrics do you use, and how did you arrive at those metrics? I think because one thing what happens is there's just so many metrics that you can track.
Yeah. So, Ashwin, in our case, we are very lean team. So we are very small team. So we are in total product and ops combined. We have around 40 people working on our main product, right? So there is a advantage to this. So when you have a fairly small team, you guys are very aligned in terms of what is working on and what are the North Star, which is at business level, you have figured out. Now, if I specifically talk about the product team, at this point, we have basically bifurcated the function in three routes, which is one is the user who's 28 days and older than that, and then fairly new segment who has just onboarded. So then it's very function specific, that user who are onboarding, unlike like grocery delivery, like Grofers. For us, it's we are into market expansion. For our use case, is not straightforward out there that you just come and you onboard with the product. So first 28 days is the journey where we basically bring people aligned with what product is serving and where you are heading with this, right? So that 28 days KPIs would be very different. It basically depends on, so we have so we do not have this, you are supposed to work on this KPI. It totally depends on the PMs who are taking care of the onboarding team. So for them, it should be ultimately aligning at the larger level that we are working on this. And then we have recommendation and engagement team, which is essentially taking care of discovery throughout the app. And then we have monetization team. So at this point, we are basically our product team is bifurcated in these three functions. But the KPIs, how do you decide, is basically North Star is this. Then how do you add value to the team, and what internally 35 or 200 metrics you are looking at, that's your responsibility. That I don't detect or we don't detect, that you decide that what works best for you.
Got it. And do you also sort of have a similar structure, where Vakul spoke about first trying to get insights into
Correct,
consumer
correct.
behavior and then sort of working your hypothesis and see if it works and then modeling
Correct,
it?
correct. So that way we are very different, Ashwin. So a lot of time when I take interviews, I come across that our processes are very different in the industry out there. So what we do is that, so as I told you, right, that 80% of things which we are working on are primary towards trying out different hypotheses. Now, in like as Vakul said, that sitting in a room and figuring out what hypothesis might work and might not work. So we, as I told you, that we are very lean team. So the feedback loop is really strong. So the flexibility of data and accessibility of what is happening at user experience level from the ops team is very handy to us. So, and it's also very frequent. So the hypothesis we are deriving at is also aligned with what is happening at user experience level, right? And then you basically break it down. Even so, say suppose if I figure out that a hypothesis is going to take me 15 days to check out if this thing is working out or not. So do you even break it down further and figure out that one small area which gives you enough confidence to invest that 15 days or 20 days of time to further invest and check out the hypothesis if it is getting us enough ROI or not. So and then if say suppose hypothesis is proven, giving us enough confidence, then basically we figure out that what is the MVP of this feature look like, and what is the shortest cycle in which I can give out this value to the users, which in turn reflects to my business metrics. So, and that's how the product roadmap keeps evolving.
Got it. Got it. Thanks, Shali. And I think Vakul, I'll come back to you. There's an interesting question. I think I sort of referenced this as well. So how do you deliver growth in such a competitive market? I mean, the question is more about, how did you sort of gain that growth, and what are the challenges that you faced when you're in such a competitive market? So can you sort of elaborate a bit more on that?
So see, the market is really competitive now, right? Probably 6 months down the line, it was not so competitive, right? And there is no substitute for a consumer experience, right? Irrespective of how big checks you have, how big the bank balance is, hardly you can't, and it's very hard to buy a consumer experience, right? So, and other players will also, I'm not saying they will take time, they could accelerate in that phase as well, right? But right now, what we essentially believe is that there are 4 or say 2 or 3 things that are very important in this entire category. So grocery is a need, it's not a want, right? It's not like I want an iPhone and hence I would splurge, right? Grocery, if you want an Ashirvad Atta, you would want it at the cheapest price, period, right? I would not want to pay extra for my Maggi, right? Or I don't want to pay extra for my ketchup, etc. So that is one, wherein how do you ensure that you are competitive in prices among different players? There is only one strategy, at least, which DMart has cracked really well, which is keep a lean assortment, but sell in such large volumes that you dictate the price. Right. So in North India, we are by far the largest grocery player, be it offline or online, and we dictate the prices in this part of the market. In South, there is our biggest competition, which is Big Basket. They dominate the market, but they follow a very different strategy. They try to solve for convenience. Now they are migrating towards prices as well. But they used to solve for convenience and freshness of fruits and vegetables, which would appeal A1 or A2, probably you and me. That will appeal you and me more. But A2, A3 households, the price is the real deal breaker there. Now, Reliance, JioMart, by far is following the price war, wherein they've come out and they've said that, okay, we'll try to fight on the price battle. but the experience that they are delivering right now is not really that great. And obviously because they've just recently started. Now, to be in this market, that's a very standard process, right? What Jasjeet has already said. There is awareness of the brand, then there is consideration, right? If you are a considered brand, then you'll get more acquisition. And if the experience is good, then your retention would be better, right? So the idea is, how do you ensure that you're always in the consideration set of the consumer and not really fall off from that consideration set, right? So that's the whole game right now.
Got it. Interesting. And I think there's one more interesting question here from Nishima. I'm not really sure if who can answer this, but it basically talks about the high frequency use case apps, such as groceries, for instance, versus the low frequency usage apps, and how do you sort of drive engagement and drive retention for apps which are more low frequency. So any of you have sort of worked on these low frequency app, and any insights into how you can drive engagement for apps which are more low frequency in nature?
So not specifically, but I think in OLX we have different categories. Some have higher engagement on the cycle time is very low. Sometimes the cycle time is very high. So in the categories where the engagement is like, I would maybe buy a car once in maybe 6 months and things like that. So over there, what we have seen is that, again, it's a game of recall, right? So if tomorrow you have an instance of like there is a need in your mind to buy a car, will this app come into your mind or not, right? It's not about how. So even though if you are doing it frequently, you will have a better recall. But even otherwise, in your word of mouth, in your ecosystem, in your area that you operate, is there enough recall that OLX or some other player is my right first choice when I go to this, right? It depends on where in that life cycle you would engage with a brand, and when that time comes, that recall should be there. So I think that is the crux over there. And how do you build that? It is that whenever you had that first use case, you give them a superlative experience, so that next time if they get a chance, they would come back to use that same experience, right? There will be a trust, a relationship with them. Second, in your community, is there like a word of mouth that can you go to this and kind of explore that scenario? So those kind of things help.
But how much of that is sort of driven by marketing, and how much of that is driven by your product team, right? Because recall, there's a very strong brand angle to that as well, right?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think if you've noticed recently, OLX is not like what it used to be in terms of marketing and spending the marketing dollars, because a lot of growth engine is actually product led, wherein if you have one good experience, there is a more likelihood chance for the customer to come back. Of course, in the initial setting, there was a lot of marketing to build in that recall in the whole ecosystem, but anything that is used or secondhand is OLX. That building on top of that with a good experience is something that worked for us quite a bit.
Got it. And I think I'm gonna leave with one final question, and after that we can pick up if there's any other interesting audience questions. But can you talk about some of your challenges or some of the mistakes or failures that happened when you're trying to build this whole product growth sort of a setup, so that if there's any aspiring product owners who's sort of trying to build this, what do you think they should watch out for from your experience of doing this iteratively, learning this, making mistakes, etc.? Any such examples?
Sure. Probably I'll give it a shot. Sure. Right. So this was somewhere in 2016. Right, we were very early in this entire space, and we used to look at how many users transacted, how many users are repeating, how many users have we acquired, etc., right? And then we were just discussing in a meeting, and someone raised a point that should we look at users for a business, right? That was the question, right? Is the best way to look at a business is from a user lens? And we were debating, and the whole point turned out in a sense that a grocery buyer is a household use case, right? If I buy groceries or my wife buys grocery, we're buying for our common household, right? We are not like Uber or Zomato or Swiggy, because for them it could be two different users, right? My wife can order for herself, I can order for myself, right? 2 different users, and hence retention, everything makes sense. But for us, it's a household, right? And hence it changed the entire view from user to how many households are we acquiring? What is the retention of a household, right? And it got reflected across different products, right? Be it referral, be it the loyalty program, be it the number of users that we used to report into number of households that we acquire. Right? So that was one very interesting insight that came to us in 2016. It changed a lot of things.
Interesting. Shelly, what about you? Any such?
Yeah, sure, Ashwin. So in our case, unlike utility apps, a lot of things which we are trying out, right? Because basically in the entertainment, especially in the content space, when the new type of market you are expanding, you are not sure what's going to work out. Basically, you are just benchmarking the evolved countries like China, and lot of other people are also trying out lot of growth loops within the product where you are figuring out that what works and what doesn't. In such cases, I think two things which are, in my understanding, are very important to keep a eye on. One is one is how and when you draw a line wherein which you figure out that this is where I'll stop putting the hacks in the system and will be more careful about building the scalable solutions forward. So in the race of trying out multiple hypotheses and very experiment driven culture, we end up having a lot of tech debt in the system. So that's where you got to figure out that what is the right balance for you and at what time, and how you basically strategically figure out that 12 months is enough or 6 months is enough for me to build this feature or build this experiment to scale. So that is one thing. And another thing is, a lot of time when product led growth we talk about, we just end up getting into a lot of vanity funnels, vanity conversions, where instead of aligning with the use case as a whole, we just end up improving a lot of chasing lot of vanity metrics that I'll improve A, B, C, and in you are not able to connect the dots at the larger level. So I think these two things I have seen often, like even I have been the victim where we spend a lot of time and then we realize that, dude, it's not worth ROI. So yeah, I think these are the two things which I would say that is most, we really have to our heads on all the time on these two things.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelly. Jasjeet?
Yeah, so I think just to add to the points with Vakul and Shelly mentioned, I think assumptions without validation is your biggest enemy. Right. I think I can relate to the Wing story, right? I think at that point of time when I came in, Wing had launched and we had a terrible retention problem at that point of time. So one way could be that you could say that this is a content platform, and hence if you surface the right content to the right customer, you are a game winner, right? So put all the effort there and let's see how it goes, right? So but what we did over there was something different, where what we did was we broke down our acquisition, activation, retention funnels. Looked at in the acquisition, we looked at the channels from where we were getting customers in, where their average retention was poorer than the retention it should be. We removed those channels. We looked at, like, we talked to our customers a lot to understand what are the problems there, and like when you come onto the home for the very first time, they were confused. We also found that in the activation funnel, we saw that the time played between the two songs was a little bit higher, right? Because we wanted to have the best bit rate possible, and in those networks it was suicidal. So all these small problems were actually the right things that were actually dampening the whole experience. So instead of looking at the next shiny thing, if you can go down, understand the customer pain points in that journey, and then relate to and be that step in the shoes of a customer to understand that where are the problems, and then create that experience, then you are in a better state of frame to accelerate growth with other tools. So I think that is my learning from at least from Wing.
Awesome. And I think there's sort of a theme here, right? So it's really about trying to understand the users, really about trying to get the insights, and then sort of going through your experiments, frameworks, engagement, all of that stuff. I think there are a couple of more questions, but I think we're short of time. I can already see the other panelists sort of waiting in the room here. So there is a poll here. I'm going to give it for about 5 or 10 seconds. Yeah. this is the part where we actually pitch our services or a product. So, if any of you in the audience wants to sort of understand more about a product, let us know. And do wait for the next session. We have a very interesting session coming in where we sort of extend the topic that we have been discussing so far, which is how do you drive this collaboration between product growth and marketing functions. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And we have we have a fairly interesting bunch of panelists coming forward next. So, hey, thank you so much, Shelly, Wakul, and Jasjeet. It was great talking to you, and thank you for spending your time. I got a lot of insights into this. Hopefully, the audience got some as well.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, Jasjeet. Thank you, Shelly.
Thank you.